Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. I'm excited about today's episode with Spencer Graham. He's actually been on this show a few times before and has been a helpful friend to get me and many others deep into the DAO space. He's been working in DAOs full-time for about 2 years now, which is extremely long for the space given how new it is. And so, we talk a little bit about his background, how he's been a Web3 product manager, and then we get specifically into DAOHaus, which is a low-code, no-code platform evolving into an extremely interesting space that we talk about on this episode. And we also just talk about philosophically why DAOs matter and how you can create a decentralized autonomous organization using DAOHaus, and why that the uniqueness and the way that this platform is so special actually matters. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there I'll have more extensive show notes and links to the different things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Spencer Graham. All right, Spencer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Well, good to be back.
So, all things DAOs, DAOHaus. You, I think, were first on the show 8, 9, 10 months ago. Have really helped me personally get very deep into the DAO space. I've now spun up, I think, 3 or 4 DAOs, actively participating in most of those. Really enjoy the DAOHaus platform. Have referred a number of different founders and DAO summoners there, and I'm excited to learn more about the recent developments with DAOHaus V3 and the 9. But for those of you who missed the earlier episodes, maybe Spencer, would you mind just tell us a little bit about a quick background, and then we'll dive in?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Spencer. I have been working in DAOs for, I guess it's almost 2 years fully. So full-time in DAOs for almost 2 years, a little bit longer than that, sort of part-time on the side. Before working in DAOs and Ethereum, Web3, crypto, whatever label you want to slap on it, my background is in economics, psychology, and then professionally in product management, in technology. At a certain point, I found Ethereum and crypto stuff just so engaging that it was taking over all of my free time outside of work.
Yeah.
And so when the opportunity came up to make all of that my full time, it was a pretty clear decision. And that was, like I said, a couple of years ago. So I've been doing kind of product-y stuff, but also some things on the technical side, as well as community design, as well for 2 years within primarily the Raid Guild community, and also within DAOHaus with a number of other things as well, but those two primarily for the last couple of years.
Cool. Yeah, all right. So that lends itself into the next question, which is, give us a little history of DAOHaus and how you got involved with it. And maybe even just, I guess this is 3 questions. What is DAOHaus? What's the history? How did you get involved with it?
Yeah, so the answer to the question of what is DAOHaus is something that is part of the history of DAOHaus.
Cool.
And has evolved as part of that history. I think what we can talk about is what is DAOHaus like today and for the past year, and then what it's evolving into. But the brief answer, just to start, is DAOHaus is a platform for community, purpose-driven community DAOs. So DAOs where the ownership and control and governance power is distributed across all members, maybe not equally, but across all members, and where the community, those individuals are focused on coming together as a community to achieve a purpose. Often that purpose is building a product. It could just be hanging out and kind of being part of a club and living shared values, but it could also be driving towards an outcome that they want to see in the world. So those are the kind of DAOs that DAOHaus provides no code tooling to create, manage, operate, participate in.
Great.
So that's DAOHaus.
Mhm.
How did I get started
Yeah.
in DAOHaus? That's the next one. Yeah. So I was at the time. This was like basically 2 years ago. I was doing most of my stuff within Raid Guild, is sort of a Web3 uh, freelancers cooperative organized as a DAO. And the tool that we used to operate our DAO was DAOHaus.
Hmm.
There's quite a lot of overlap between members of Raid Guild and early members of DAOHaus. So I started talking to some of them, and they were at that point starting to think about turning DAOHaus from a sort of basic side project into a full-fledged product, community, ecosystem, etc. And I found that really exciting because the experience that I had within and was having at the time within Raid Guild, I felt was so heavily facilitated and made possible by the tools, technologies, and application that was DAOHaus, that I was really relishing the opportunity to be a part of shaping that for even more people.
Cool. And so then the basic history then of DAOHaus, it said, did it start out of the Raid Guild type DAOs that were coming, or what's the basic history of it?
So the history of it is that the type of DAO framework that DAOHaus focuses on is called the Moloch DAO framework. That is a DAO framework that started with the very first the Moloch DAO, which was deployed or summoned, as we call it, in the I think it was February 2019, and that DAO was created to facilitate funding of ETH2 development, research, and other kinds of activities. And people really found something special about that new construct for a DAO, and kind of re-engaged a lot of energy in the ecosystem, in the space, in the Ethereum community about DAOs and what they could be. And so a lot of people actually started to fork that code that created that facilitated the Moloch DAO into other DAO, and using that same code for other DAOs. Raid Guild was one of those DAOs. Meta Cartel was another one. And what started to become clear was that the community that were using those types of DAOs needed something to make it easier to actually be a member of those DAOs. So DAOHaus was born out of that need, felt very strongly by that enthusiastic community. And that has kind of continued to be the driving force of everything that we do, focused on supporting the needs of our existing community and trying to fold in other people and communities to get the same kind of benefits that we have all got.
Got it. And practically, DAOHaus is a DAO of DAOs. So you have to have a DAO on the DAOHaus platform in order to then participate in the top level DAO. Or can you explain a little bit more how that structure works?
Yeah. So so there are a number of DAO tools and DAO frameworks that are built by companies. DAOHaus is not one of those. DAOHaus, everything that DAOHaus builds and operates and runs and maintains and owns is built and operated and run and maintained and owned by the DAOHaus community. That is organized as you're saying, currently as a DAO of DAOs. There is probably the most active DAO in that ecosystem as far as building on DAOHaus and stewarding the DAOHaus platform and ecosystem and tools is our core contributor DAO. That has gone through a series of different names, but from House DAO to WarCamp to some others. But that is a DAO that is all the primary core contributors to DAOHaus are organized within that DAO, but it is just one member of a larger DAO, and it is a peer inside of that larger DAO with a number of the other DAOs that use the DAOHaus platform. So Raid Guild, Meta Gamma Delta, Purion, lots of other DAOs are all collectively managing the resources that we all of our DAOs collectively share, as far as resources to fund the development and maintenance and ongoing innovation within the DAOHaus ecosystem. So that core contributor DAO is funded by that higher level parent DAO that we are currently calling UberHaus.
Got it. Cool. All right. So then, having summoned a number of DAOs on DAOHaus now, I love it. I mean, there's so much flexibility, lots of different types of minions and vaults and ways of organizing DAOs that the sky's the limit in terms of the complexity of what you can do. Now that's V2, right? That's V2, Moloch V2 of the and so I definitely would recommend anybody listening to this or watching it to go check that out. But there's a V3 coming. Can you tell us more about what that is and how that might even structurally, philosophically might be evolving for
Yeah.
DAOHaus?
So what you just described as the current state of DAOHaus V2 is that it's very flexible and there's a lot you can do. That is true, but it's not enough. And we've learned that it's not enough because we, after working with numerous DAOs and working with them to try to structure what their DAO should look like, we realized there's tons of ways to structure their DAO with DAOHaus tools and Moloch DAOs and the minions and vaults and all of that stuff. It's still there. We needed better ways to be able to craft appropriate user experiences around those different ways to structure a DAO. Every single DAO has different needs. Every single DAO is going to have a slightly different structure, needs slightly different tools to solve its slightly different problems, or drastically different problems and drastically different tools. And it was never going to be the case that we DAOHaus could create tools and solutions to all of those problems for all the DAOs that wanted to use DAOHaus or that we felt would be best served by using DAOHaus. So from the beginning of DAOHaus V2, we had this idea of plugins and things like that we call boosts. But the way that DAOHaus V2 was designed, or just kind of what it needed to be, made it very, very difficult, or not nearly as easy as it should be for other developers to build those kind of things that extend the DAOHaus platform. So instead, with DAOHaus V3, we're tearing everything down and building it all back up from scratch to be pretty much like 100% modular.
Wow.
So we're starting with actually a brand new set of contracts, which is the Moloch V3, or as some people may have heard, BAL, B-A-A-L contracts, which is a community, not just DAOs, but other organizations have joined in to develop these new set of contracts that expand the capabilities of the core Moloch DAO framework. So we're building DAOHaus V3 on top of that. And what DAOHaus V3 is going to be, it's really three things that all kind of interleave together. So at the base layer is where it's appropriate now to call it a protocol. So that's the contracts. So it's that the Moloch V3 contracts, as well as Moloch V3 has a new extensions or plugin interface called Shamans. So we have contracts relating to that. And then also continuing our work with the minion vaults, which extend the account-based or sort of additional governance styles of a core Moloch DAO. So all of that together at the contract level, and then at the subgraph level, that is what we would call the protocol. On top of that, we have built and are continuing to build fully modular components. And so those components are one part of what we are calling our DAOHaus V3 developer toolkit or tools. So those components are going to be, there's an alpha version available now, but eventually they'll be published and available for anybody to use. So they'll be organized in libraries as well as an SDK. And the idea there is to give developers super easy, fast capabilities to build applications on top of the DAOHaus protocol. So those components include hooks to the protocol, like all the different data sources and smart contracts that make up the protocol, as well as carefully crafted UI elements to help to make it as easy as possible, if a developer desires, to build an application from scratch on top of that supporting infrastructure. So allowing developers to build applications that actually sit on top of and can only exist if there is a DAOHaus DAO underlying them already. So that's the protocol layer, and then the tools and infrastructure layer. Then using those same tools and infrastructure that any developer has access to, we are also building the first set of applications, and we're sort of roughly calling this the DAOHaus platform or user platform, which is sort of the user-facing replacement or advancement of what is currently at app.daohaus.club today. So instead of a monolithic application, we're breaking that app down into multiple apps, and building all of those apps up with the same modular components that we're using to support developers to build their own apps. So if you are a developer and you use our SDK or our other tools, then you'll immediately get the ability to, one, plug into the protocol, and two, to have the users of your application immediately and instantly get access to all the other applications that have been built using the same tools on top of the same protocol, including the applications that we are building to facilitate kind of core DAO operations. So any user that comes to your application and either creates a DAO or brings their own DAO and starts using your application also has access to the entire ecosystem of other applications instantaneously via the magic of Web3 composability. So that's how we're going to actually support many different types of DAOs and all of their idiosyncratic needs without having to build everything for everybody, because we're opening up, we're allowing anybody to build anything on top of the core stuff that we are focusing on.
That's amazing. Okay, I have a million follow-up questions. I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, these components, will they, in the smart contracts that you're building, will they be available to be used on any EVM equivalent blockchain, or are you moving outside of EVM, or what's the scope there?
Currently, we're focused on EVM.
Okay.
That may change in the future as we sort of survey the conditions and the activity on different networks or different non-EVM networks, and as the developer tooling continues to mature on those other networks. For now, most of what we do is pretty much only possible in terms of the tools that we are creating on top of the smart contracts. That's, I think, mostly only possible on EVM networks. That is going to start to change, though, so that may change what we're focused on. But pretty much any of the major Ethereum-centric EVM networks are ones that we currently support, and will of course continue to add to support to others as it makes sense. Today, Ethereum mainnet, Gnosis chain, and Polygon, those are two, and Celo are three side chains that we support, and then we also support Arbitrum and Optimism for L2s on rollups. And then as things like, obviously the timing of this is very uncertain, but as things like StartNet continue to mature and other ZK rollups, will very likely start to add support to there as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Next question, with regard to the UI elements that you're talking about, are you going all the way and creating a low code, no code solution for people to create their own sort of white labeled DAO platforms? Or when you say UI elements, are these packages, are these like React components that people would put in and build their own application?
Yeah, more the latter. We, depending on what we sort of sense as needs, and when I say we, I mean our community senses as needs.
Yeah.
It may be appropriate to build a low code or no code version. That actually sounds like a pretty great idea. Our focus currently, though, is on kind of the foundational aspects of that in terms of like more developer facing components.
Got it. Okay. So that is extremely ambitious to completely modularize everything that you're doing and then rebuild. So there still will be a application that looks very similar to what it looks like right now, where we can go and summit DAOs and we don't have to tinker around with it. Is that what you're saying? We'll still have the same basic things, maybe souped up a little bit. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is right, but there's one key difference is that the intention is for that application, or actually it's a sort of suite of applications connected together. The intention is for those to maybe eventually be replaced by community versions, or to be complemented by other versions of applications that maybe do similar things, but only for a particular context, or only for a particular use case, or maybe just for the same context as we're focused on, but just way better. And if that happens, that's awesome. Um, Basically, the applications that we're building are there because there needs to be something for people to be able to uh, use the DAOs in the DAOs ecosystem. But our intention is to facilitate other developers to build things that are even better than we could even do ourselves.
Okay. And then you have some new features coming, because one of the things that was extremely attractive to me about the Moloch style DAOs was the permission nature and the non-transferable, uh, essentially shares or governance tokens, or people that have different names for things that have voting weight for the DAO. And it sounds like that the flexibility now of taking those non-transferable shares, and if everyone agrees or it passes as a proposal, those can be turned into transferable tokens. Can you talk a little
Yes.
bit more about that and other types of features that might be coming like that?
Yeah. So that is all thanks to the advancements within the Moloch v3 smart contract framework, or DAO framework. And if I had to sum up, there's many different improvements and new features and capabilities within those versus the V2 contracts. But if I had to sum all of them up, I would say that they together they provide a lot more flexibility for DAOs
Hmm.
without um, without changing the foundational concept of a actually fully community run DAO, where everybody in the community has a portion of the actual power. Adds a ton of flexibility to DAOs, including and maybe even especially in support of multiple phases of a DAO's life cycle. When a DAO is young, when it's first starting, and its purpose might be immature, its processes have not been hardened, its its concepts, its culture, the way it does everything is just new. It is very difficult. The degree of difficulty of creating a DAO from scratch that is permissionless and open is extremely high. DAOs that are young are much better served to start small and permissioned with non-transferable governance power. But and that may be the case for some DAOs throughout their entire life cycle. Some DAOs are going to want to stay that way because that's the type of organization that makes most sense for their purpose and what they're trying to do. And today, that's a great, like, we see lots of examples of those today with DAOHaus v2. But what we do know is that other DAOs or other purposes are at some point going to be best served once the DAO has matured its processes and hardened some of its the way it does things, and its culture has sort of set in. It might be another DAO might be best served to start to open up and get the advantage of having a more being and presenting a more permissionless environment, or
Hmm.
allowing its token to be traded in a more open way.
Hmm.
Um, and so we don't want to necessarily say when that should happen, but we absolutely want to make that possible for a DAO to decide when that should happen. So in a DAOHaus DAO, just like which is a Moloch DAO, there are two forms of governance power. One is sort of voting, um, and the other is economic.
Hmm.
And shares have both voting and economic stake or weight, and loot, or what we're starting to call non-voting stake, has just, well, the economic part. Both of those in Moloch v3, in DAOHaus v3, can be made either transferable or not transferable independently from each other
Hmm.
based on a decision made and basically, essentially based on approval by the DAO. So I anticipate that there will be a number of DAOs that start out small and fully permissioned, that over time decide it's actually a good idea for us to unlock and make either our voting stake or our non-voting stake transferable. I think there's going to be lots of interesting experiments within that design space.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This is extremely exciting. So if people listening in are interested in helping with either the release of this or in one form or another supporting DAOHaus, how would they do that?
So I think there's two big categories of or ways that people can help. One is if it's category one in no particular order here, but category one is funding. As you said earlier, this is a pretty ambitious project, and we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of things that we need to allocate resources to. And at this point, that is more than the resources that we have. So we need more funding. There are probably lots of different ways that can look, but if you are somebody who has funding and is interested in supporting DAOHaus in some way, then the best thing you can do is reach out to us, including myself, and we can have a conversation about what that could potentially look like. The other category is sort of community development, or testing out of the tools that we are building, or beginning to build applications using the developer tools that we're building. We've just released, kind of soft release, an alpha version of those tools. They'll continue to expand and mature. But if you are interested in building on top of infrastructure, like what we've been talking about with DAOHaus V3, then come talk to us, and we can start to point you in the direction of the tools that we're building and support you in your journey to build and experiment with some applications.
Got it. Okay, so then if I wanted to create my own www.mysite.xyz and have it have Moloch DAO features and interact with blockchain ABC that runs the EVM, that's possible right now, even with your alpha release. Is that what you're saying?
So we haven't put out any public communications. So some of our developer contributors may yell at me for answering in the affirmative to that. But let's just say very soon that will be something that we're more capable of actively supporting. Yes.
Got it. All right. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it's ambitious. Last topic is, the last 30, 40 episodes or so, I've been really getting down into the weeds of Web3, different parts of DeFi and metaverses and NFTs and DAOs, different types of tokens. And I'm all from the lens of, why does it matter? Like, how is this helping the world? So I know we talked about this a little bit in some of the previous episodes, but I figured I'd ask it again. So for you, philosophically, practically, however you want to answer it, why do DAOs matter, and why is the work that you're doing, why does it matter?
It matters because so many of the things that are wrong with the world today, or create problems with the world today, are related to power distribution issues, or asymmetric distribution of power. In corporations today, there are a handful of people who really hold all of the power and can make decisions and kind of drive their organizations in directions that they want. That's certainly not always a bad thing. But when we have conversations about stakeholder capitalism, really the conversation we're having there is that they're not as many, they're the people that need to be at the table for making decisions about corporate actions are not at the table. DAOs put the right people at that table, or rather they open up that table to, or they open up seats at that table for the people who are most interested and whose lives those organizations most impact. There are, for many other reasons as well, power distributions are well, I'll put it this way: DAOs directly address the problem of power in society. For DAOs might be the first time in human history that we're able to put actual strong, hard executive power into the hands of the many, and create scenarios where the many don't have to trust or rely on the goodwill of the few. We have the opportunity to create a scenario, to create a world where all of us, to varying degrees and varying contexts, have the power that we actually deserve to be able to control and influence the impact of many different things on us and on the things that we care about. So, in a sense, if we get it right, we have an incredibly large opportunity to turn the way society works upside down for the better. So when we talk about why are DAOs important, it's almost like the better question is like, how are they not important? Because it's almost easier to answer that one, because the impact, I think, has the potential to be incredibly widespread throughout all of society.
It's good. It's good. So solving human coordination, there's this new concept called an impact or impact DAOs out there. What are your thoughts about that movement, or the way that sort of early language is coming about?
So to a degree, I think it's great to highlight DAOs and I guess I'll say it this way: it's great to highlight any organization that is doing things that improve the welfare of society and improve the way that things work for people, wherever that may be, and improve the lives of people. In another sense, I feel so strongly about the capability of DAOs in general to do that in a very structural way, that saying like the label or the concept of impact DAO is like almost a tautology. If it's not, then I think we have almost failed in the way that we have in the direction that we have taken DAOs. If there are DAOs that are not impact DAOs, then I would question that either they're not DAOs at all, or we've opened up a potentially interesting but also potentially dangerous space. So we need to be thinking carefully about the type of tools that we're enabling non-impact DAOs to use, and how we need to address that scenario.
I like that answer. That opens up another 1,000 questions, of which I will. There's another guest I think I want to bring on to our next episode around power dynamics and impact for the world. So I'm gonna posit that guest should come on our next episode. So yeah, that's good. Any final words before we wrap up this one? Definitely appreciate your time. Any final thoughts based on anything we talked about today?
No, I'll just end with, I care very, very deeply about what DAOHaus is building, and if anything that we've talked about here today is interesting to anybody listening, I would love to talk about it more and kind of share my perspective and hear your perspectives, or answer your questions about what it is that we're doing at DAOHaus.
Got it. Okay, and that's Spengra on Twitter, now DAOit on Twitter. Did I get those right?
Yep, that's right.
All right, I will put links in the show notes so you can hit them up on Twitter. Continue the conversation, answer that call to action that we talked about earlier. It's been great, Spencer. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.